Not long ago, significant changes occurred in my life. At the age of 30, I finally got married and moved to live in a private house with my father-in-law and mother-in-law. They are good people, so I didn't have any problems, especially considering that at that time, the idea of living outside the city appealed to me. My mother-in-law was always at home, and my father-in-law had a job with a flexible schedule. He would be away for days, so we didn't see each other very often. The story began when my father-in-law was at work. I have a standard schedule from Monday to Friday, but on that day, I took a day off to take care of some personal matters. Around noon, I stopped by the house to pick up some documents. I parked the car by the gate and walked into the yard. That's when I heard a strange noise coming from the shed. I thought maybe my mother-in-law needed to get some tools and couldn't do it herself, so I decided to help. I walked in and realized that there was no one to help. The neighbor was handling things just fine on his own. The scene was quite unusual. The neighbor and my mother-in-law were having an affair in the shed. This neighbor always flirted with her, even in front of her husband, but everyone took it as harmless jokes, so no one paid much attention. How wrong they all were. It turned out that this couple was actually having an affair behind my father-in-law's back, which was a real unpleasant surprise for me. Apparently, they had done this before, as it was easy to choose a time when my father-in-law was not at home and I was at work. The lovers didn't notice me because they were too busy with each other, and at first, I was confused and didn't know how to react properly. My father-in-law is a great guy, and I felt sorry for him, but I didn't know what to do in this situation. I quickly left so they wouldn't notice me, although I wanted to break them up and give them both a piece of my mind. In the end, I decided that my father-in-law should know what happened, but I knew how much he loved his wife, so he wouldn't believe my words. I needed some evidence. I had left my phone in the car, and if I tried to record them, they would definitely notice me. I decided that if they were doing this, they had done it before and would do it again. I needed a camera. That same day, I went to a friend's store, and he helped me choose a suitable camera with high-quality recording and advised me on how to install it properly. I didn't reveal the real reason, I just said I wanted to install it in my yard for security purposes. I installed the camera when my mother-in-law and wife went shopping, and my father-in-law was not at home. From that moment on, I occasionally reviewed the footage to get evidence and present it to my father-in-law. To my surprise, nothing happened. My mother-in-law noticed that I had become colder towards her. I barely spoke to her and didn't greet her. She thought I was upset with her for something. If she knew the real reason, she would have begged me not to tell her husband. Fortunately, she didn't figure it out, and I avoided unnecessary drama. After another 2 weeks, when I had almost lost hope and started thinking that nothing would come of it, the camera finally captured the necessary footage. Everything was clear, and there was no doubt about what was happening. I took the recording to my father-in-law when he came home from work. I simply gave it to him to watch and decide what to do, as it was his wife and his life. I just wanted to help him see the truth. My father-in-law was furious and wanted to confront them immediately, but I managed to calm him down. After he regained his composure, I asked him what he wanted to do, as he was a hot-tempered person, and there were real concerns that things could end very badly, even fatally. He said he wouldn't do anything too drastic and assured me he could handle it without any unnecessary drama. I looked at him and didn't believe a word, but I decided not to interfere for the time being. My father-in-law showed her the video and caused such a scandal that the whole street could hear. After the argument inside the house, he kicked my mother-in-law out to the neighbor's house, punched the neighbor, and calmed down for the time being. He returned home and threw her belongings into the neighbor's yard through the window, telling her not to come back. The neighbor wasn't too happy that my mother-in-law was now staying at his house. His wife came out, saw the flying clothes, and missed most of the scandal, so he had to explain everything to her from the window. The woman called my father-in-law a crazy liar and said her husband would never do such a thing. My father-in-law invited her to watch the video evidence. She quickly went to watch, although her husband tried to stop her. Within just 2 minutes, the woman rushed back to her yard and started beating my mother-in-law and her husband. The scandal had now become a neighborhood-wide affair, and the whole street gathered to watch. The argument was heated and intense, with clothes flying, tears, and sobbing. The neighbor's husband was begging at her feet for forgiveness, but she decided to follow my father-in-law's example and threw her husband's belongings out onto the street. She started doing this while my mother-in-law just stood there crying, begging to be let back into what was now probably her ex-husband's house. The neighbors had a good laugh at the spectacle. In the end, the lovers from both houses were kicked out with their belongings. They loaded everything into the neighbor's car and left the area. The show for the neighbors was over. However, my mother-in-law didn't want to give up hope of reconciling with her husband. My father-in-law started taking extra shifts at work to see her less. My wife visited her mother and found out she had rented an apartment and was living there, as she had never worked and was paying for the apartment with my wife's salary. The neighbor who had been flirting with my mother-in-law refused any involvement in her life and, after a week, returned to his wife, who forgave him, although she initially caused a big scene during the scandal. This was very important for that woman, as she also didn't work and had no one to support her. I think this was the reason for the quick forgiveness of the unfaithful husband. Nevertheless, everything gradually returned to normal. Personally, I didn't like that my wife was supporting her mother with her own money, but there was nothing I could do about it. In the end, she didn't ask me for money to support her mother, so I just accepted it and waited for her to realize the magnitude of her mistake. A couple more months passed, and my father-in-law officially got a divorce. He said there was a colleague who showed interest in him, so he was considering starting a new relationship. His children were grown, so he could afford to live for himself. I understood him completely, so I supported him in his efforts to rebuild his personal life. My mother-in-law also started to get her life back on track and found some guy to move in with. It was easier for my wife now, as she didn't have to support anyone. Honestly, I didn't expect such a turn of events, but if the neighbor fell for her, I believed someone else could too. It would make sense. Nevertheless, my mother-in-law's life couldn't be called good. She complained to my wife that the apartment was not a private house, there was less space, and her new boyfriend didn't earn much, so they had to economize on everything. Well, she chose this path herself, so she deserved the consequences. Dear listeners, if you liked this story, please like this video, subscribe to our channel, and share this video with your friends. Thank you for watching.